There is a Serenity in the Dark by Joseph Leo Hickey III. Read by the author. First edition. Cover artwork by Julia Rowetter. Disclaimer. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, businesses, places, events, and incidents are either the product of the imagination of the poet or used in a fictitious manner. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. This book contains a fictional story about a high school senior who was murdered on the last day of high school, physically coming back from the dead and exploring the world 25 years after she left it. List of books in the poetry series are as follows: Love Poems at the End of Our Lives, 2018. The Last Poem, 2018. The Penultimate Poems, 2019. The Revenant, 2019. There's a Serenity in the Dark, 2020. No Greater Sorrow, forthcoming. The Last and Eternal Fire, forthcoming. No One Ever Truly Dies, forthcoming. Part 1. Directionless. As the wheels of the vehicles turned, sleep greeted her, along with the dreams, the endless charade of footsteps, walking as if blind into a world of dreams, where she waited and dreamed about being fulfilled in a way that you could still feel with an empty stomach, and a desire to be expressed the same way that flames are ignited when forests erupt and consume the world, each person believing what they know. Come and hold the beauty of this passing moment, her dreams told her, as she lay fast asleep on the Greyhound bus to D.C., as the air left her lungs slowly, in a rhythmic pattern, as every other person in the world would be changed but would not recognize. Make a final memory, her dream said to her. Spending the end of the world with you is better than spending it alone, it concluded. She echoed these thoughts in her mind for the rest of her half-life. Her soul was now exposed. The things that we don't taste are hidden from us, because they were too much for us. As we waited for the end of the world, we didn't realize a voice the world had rejected would not be paid attention to, even if it were to come back to life after we slaughtered it, because they would not listen to the warnings of hell, even if someone were to come back from the dead. The bus still moving through these states, rarely stopping. Geography divides us. She stood somewhere in her dreams, away from all things that were familiar, away from all things that exuded truth. Hands outstretched toward the unfiltered light that poured from the sky, and her feet barely soaked by the shallow pool she stood on. How she knew that she would descend into the deepest recesses of that pool, and then never stand up and walk again. And in this dream the world was exalted in whirlwinds of celebration, because all the wars had ended. All the lovers had found their beloved. All the songs that were sung told the truth. All the shadows had been slain. And everyone knew where to find the ones they loved. And the Revenant stood in this world where a voice spoke to her saying, Love covers these oceans, fills every crevice and empty space in the world. If only you sit back and listen, you will understand. And with this understanding, there is a truth the world before had no knowledge of. Serenity was drawn by the music that was sung, and she walked through the crowd of millions of people that had all found their peace and joy in the moments when they understood what was inside the human soul. They cast their deadly weapons far up into space, or destroyed them, so that they would not be tempted by them to fall into the disaster of fighting, dying, and wasting away, bleeding out on a battlefield, with no way to find peace, no way to recover from the torture that was embalming the world. She walked through the light, and then found that everyone was leaving the world, because they understood that there were thousands of other worlds to explore. There were millions of worlds they would not have time to visit, because even if they spent all their life traveling, they would never see them all. And the wheels on the bus moved forward, as she lay there fast asleep, collecting memories in the darkness of her mind, bringing them to the forefront. She remembered that no one ever can solve the darkness within their own souls, and she found herself in a world at war again, because the peace and the joy was all simply an illusion that had been thrust into her mind due to wishful thinking and because of lust. The peace within her soul was never there. It was never tangible. The feelings she thought she could hold were always weightless. And then she returned to the midnights, where she sat in a bomb shelter with 100 other people, as the bombs blew off the shells and clattered upon the cities, and then exploded, sending the shards of the skyscrapers into the hearts of those who are innocent, and sent the truth that was not found in the Word of God into the hearts of those who are already too far gone to be saved. And she had already experienced the extremes of what violence can do, so she was no longer afraid. She greeted the man-made hellfire raining down from the sky with open arms, and she greeted it like she would greet an old friend. And she knew that all smiles and joy would be gone forever. She had been so close to death, yet at the same time it made her nervous, so she started shaking uncontrollably and grew so close to the moments when she was not sure if she would ever have normality in her half-life again. She knew she had a message to tell the worlds, but no worlds would ever hear her. They would block her off from every microphone in the world whenever she got close to them. She would not know if there was ever a time when she would become closer to the memories of being alone in the night and sinking into her own tears, or if she would die covered in her own blood for the second time. Lessons unlearned, life unfulfilled, time all wasted, words lost all power, bombs had become Almighty God. The only language we now understand is violence, one sword thrusting into another's side, or cutting off the head of families. We were so close, all we wanted was a simple life, together without the flood of violence. Peace and stability. There were reasons for going to war, but did they find their validation when we were all destroyed and our blood was on your hands? Will anyone look back on us and say it was worth it? I never want to live in a world that cannot see the value in the souls that you have slain. When we shut the lights off and close our eyes, hoping we were in a different world, because all the sensations are the same. But Serenity woke up and realized where she was for a moment at least. The apocalypse postponed. She remembered that the bombing threats this time were just a false alarm, and that she would have just a little bit more time left in the world to contemplate things, and to have no one listen to her, so that she could teach the world the lessons that she had learned. Her past life was more a dream than a reality. 25 years later, and she had learned all the lessons that the world had never learned. Flashes of light against the backdrop of a city at night that flooded into the bus. She drifted back to sleep for another time, and these lights from the city came into her dreams, where she imagined she could live other lives, and that she knew that power and money were indeed the root of all evil. That we could spend so little time caring about those without these things. However, no one ever has nothing. There is depth and there is joy in the simple act of breathing and thriving. All declarations of love. She gazed out the windows of her dreams, and she felt so weary, so near to desperation and hopelessness, so close to worthlessness. Nothing she could ever do to intervene. A room with a view to all her worst nightmares unfolding. What is a life that has nothing to offer you, but something you can reject and never speak to and never offer anything to? The drapes are pulled back, and we see the true darkness in the edges of the classroom, where we learn more about wasting time, and she drifted off into books, dreaming about a lover who would find her, take her out of the dull world and into the one where joy thrives. And as she walked out of the world, she was greeted by the vastness of oblivion, and the great sea of nothingness swallowed her, where she was forgotten for about 25 years, and then when she came back, the world was shocked to see her, but only for a moment, and never changed anything it was doing in the end. A life like that of Sylvia Plath, too depressed to move, and not knowing why. A life drawn into the depths of so much desire but no realization. A life of drowning into a frightening ocean, where you do not see her, and will never guess what she is feeling now. I put down my pen for several years and never lifted my fingers to write, because of how after the intoxicating depths I'd fallen into, I never wanted to leave the sadness that had extrapolated to every recess of my heart. And I found myself too exhausted after my war with the world to ever write against it. I would fall away from you, because your heart had become sordid. Serenity lay asleep and had more dreams in which the world was fucked up, tempted to bury yourself in the unbelievable depths of diligent despair. There is darkness hovering over the world, where my emotions are drowned. On the flight, and I dream of falling so far that I never get up again and get my bearings, and am never found again. The oceans that we fly over, the walls of isolation, the fences we've gripped around ourselves. I was never a child of the soil, was always destined to fly, always destined to want more than I could ever attain, always falling more and more until eventually the plane takes a nosedive and falls deep into the oceans, creating a splash of water, sending water all up and down these streets. As she dreamed on the bus, she confronted the monsters that dwelt inside her inner being, that crawled all up her soul. She drew closer to becoming who she never thought she could become. In this confrontation with the monster who dwelt so close to her soul became a war, but a silent one in which each side was too scared to make the first move. So for the rest of her life she stared down this demon, and it never made a move, just silently taunted her. And when she grew addicted to the drugs, it taunted her. When she watched her friends grow in silence, she was mocked by this demon. When the kingdom comes, we will stand alone, so alienated that we will never understand language again. That the God who comes down with a sword was never our friend. The Dark Lord follows us and brandishes a sword of death. Hell's gates opened so wide for us. The light of truth did not shine for us. Everything we heard was bad news. Every day we lived, we strayed from those pews, where the word of lies grew more vibrant. To describe things that have no voice, to describe things that beg to be kept hidden, like the coldness that caresses your cheeks when you step outside for the first time into a brutal and broken world. Desire. What is lacking? What is needed to take away the ulcer in my soul? Aching, bleeding, pleading to leave and take itself away to a place where it will never feel anything again, but belonging and understanding language. But for now, a restless ocean that cannot be easily calmed. Vigil procession down my streets, where once were people celebrating and singing songs, now mourning. You are the one who calms me. When the oceans roar, when she is across the oceans, they echo, and I can feel the vibrations connecting us. We together become closer than we ever thought we could grow while we are so far apart. We at the end of the world, in the middle of the last pandemic, grow closer to each other, and never will pull away ever again. When you hold me, pull me so close to your heart that I will be able to feel it beat, and in this beating, the rhythm that all creation will hear, and the lyricism that we all heard when we were in union and heard music before the world caved in on itself, and we all sang the blues and accepted the call from terror like the call of an old friend. As she sat on the bus, she was barely able to sleep, and she had vague dreams in which she found herself lonely, forsaken, broken, bitter, swallowed pills of dissolution and frequent despair, and went into that home and suffered domestic abuse for the rest of her life. No way to escape or to gain education, because her life was over forever, and she grew into despair that the only life she would ever know would be one of recitation of countless lies she knew in her heart to be false, but could not dispute with another soul. The bus stopped at the rest station. She walked out and stared at the night moon, and once again grasped at the air as if it were holy, and looked across at the payphone. But she knew she had no family left to call. In the world, she was all alone. Eventually, she found herself walking through the streets of Washington, D.C. Vigil candle processions all through the street, where people were once again grateful to be alive, and they only saw the miracle of their own lives when it was so effervescently threatened. When the gun was pressed up against the throat of the world, we knew that what we had was valuable, that our lives needed to be lived as if they were the only lives we would have. The tears poured profusely. The truth we never understood about death. We all play our part. We will all have broken parts. A kaleidoscope of dreams. An array of colors we will not comprehend. The way it feels to have your soul leave your body, slip so far away that you will never experience anything again except unnerving passions, and in this life you feel as if at any moment you could fall victim to a disease that is invisible, which you will never feel. We know our spiritism unites us because we do not understand each other, but we only understand the soul. When she walked through the city, she drew hold of the warmth that was fleeting, and knew that panic would set in when the world watched the bombs fall. Would they hold on to their loved ones, or would they run for futile cover? But she would greet the blast with open arms, draw it into herself, and would greet the future knowing that death isn't as frightening as everyone else thought it was. She continued to walk through the city. She greeted all the strangers who would no longer be strangers. She labored with them as they labored. She wept with them as they wept. She walked with the lonely until they were no longer alone. She felt the torture of those experiencing agony. She walked down every street of the city and the streets of the suburbs where no one understood that the truth of the life of the universe was loyally compassionate and causes the experience of freedom for all people, depth and metaphor, life-destroying routine, and breaking a cycle to save someone who no one noticed was drowning. The tremendous weight of my failure in the world at attaining love, the virulent war waged against us as we together struggled to hold on to each other and find our own grounding in a world where the sand beneath our feet was quickly dissipating. The last words on her notebook, before the unemptied trash bin spilled over, and the words that were supposed to be left unread were exposed and studied. The immediate stabbing and visceral dart that pierces my heart is the burden of love, the kiss of pain. When they mourn me, they will not understand me. When they look for me, they will not find me. When we have a resolution in our heart that we want to take our supplications before the throne of God so that we can finally have our problems solved, but we will realize that it is us with the power to transform the worlds. But we are beat down. Your boot prints were all over us. We want all of the truth to come out about who is the greater poet, who felt the most viscerally, about who has lost the most, gone through the most divorces, in which I have done nothing wrong. But to be cut off from the land of the living is always to be so far away from satisfaction. She was left alone with joy in her soul. When she tried to spread her joy with the rest of the world, she could not, because she was violently suppressed. I think music is what will bring us together. Through the times when the world is more insane, and the events that define our generation are war, famine, plague, and the death of our entire generation long before our time. If you know how much my heart aches for you, you would hold on to the truth of love and not letting go. It would tell you things about the world that you would never otherwise understand. She hoped to find in the midst of chaos something tangible to hold on to. She found herself alone once again at the corner of your street. She found herself so broken that she coughed up the desperation which she clung on to her entire life. The world grew colder around her, and then she had so much trouble breathing, she could not understand why the world had such spite towards her. She wandered through the darkness and breathed each breath with gratitude, love, held closely onto the melody she had within her soul, and breathed slowly, held herself so far in love that she knew the world was beautiful, and she never gave up on this beauty. She wandered into a liquor store, bought a single bottle of wine with the money she got from begging on the streets. She sat alone drinking it, imagining there were friends in the world to comfort her, that there was a reason to celebrate amid so much despair. One day, she knew the world would recognize the face of resurrection, believe in it, and recognize the value in being raised from the dead, the dignity that life has, that it always finds a way to crawl through the cracks of impossibility, that she could find herself away from those who had always hated her. Another day went by until she ended up working as a waitress and was no longer living on the streets of Washington, D.C., but found herself in Michigan. She didn't go to work anymore, but instead stayed inside all day long as a plague ravaged the country. During this plague, she stayed alone in her apartment, counted the time, and waited for it to pass, dreaming about a past life where she did the same. Serenity had a nightmare in which she sank into a world in which all people attached themselves to the power they sought. When they seized it, they flagrantly abused it. Serenity was outside walking by the lake, and she breathed in the air of peace, knowing that she was here for a reason, that each moment where she would dream about being farther away from where she was perfect, that she wouldn't need anything else but to sit back and imagine the world she wanted. But no one believed her when she spread her message of love and compassion, because even if someone were to come back from the dead, they would not listen, would not stop and reverse the path they were going, would not embrace the weightlessness of their own beliefs within a world that was growing predictably darker. Part 2. Voice. Poems from Serenity's perspective. I sat here for hours, so many false starts with my writing, could not describe the way the world has cascaded down into its despair, could not tell you about the longing within my heart to live in a world that is no longer broken. The words express the panic as we realize the world will never be the same again. I look at the picture of us and dream that we are once again both together. I walked down the lonely road of life and began to regret everything that had brought me up to here. But I have lost more than I can bear. Through the grief encompassing me, I knew that I would never be in love with life again. You look into my eyes and you are excited to hold me and to never leave me, to be there for the rest of my days. As the days pass, I will dream of you as you sleep beside me. The fading lights of the city as we transcend it. As the car drives through it and the days turn to night. Where there were once things we could buy, but now we do not have any money. So we traverse the city with nothing to do and nothing to become. We will not calm down because we know that our youth has already defined us. Anthemic, angry, bitter. War waged, our war won with our words that transcend this place and break through time, telling you about the value in our souls. As life thrusts itself violently through you, you are now drawn, purified, washed, passing by the mass of people, evaporating like clouds. You are dreaming. Today I was walking through the woods and I realized that the natural world is more of an inspiration to me than anything else. What you do today will have an impact forever on the hearts of those who are innocent. The certain spell of darkness that rests over us when we run and we do not stop, putting on records and then lying down, not waking up, even after the record finished playing. I am in the arms of pain, indulging in the touch. A life lived away from the comfort of home. A life lived in poverty. A day we realized that nothing we gained mattered. expression, creation, taking nothing in, building it into something beautiful, a true creation from nothing, the only thing that is beautiful. When there is hatred, there can suddenly be peace, understanding, and resolve. We were teenagers who, even though our lives were just starting, now mine, already destroyed. The vicious and solvent nature of the debts we have accumulated, or rather were thrust upon us, and which we never agreed to. The thoughts about how every website closes its doors to the light of freedom of speech, and there is only darkness and no one can see. How during the pandemic we stay inside our own doors. We do not get up to go anywhere. And then, when the pandemic ends, we decide to never leave again. The vacuous nature of darkness, which echoes like loneliness, light nothing but the presence of sight. Blindness is the absence of sight. Blindness is simply the presence of nothing. There are no senses to detect what is around us. A light that comes and floods my heart. When pain takes my hand, walking away from the school, somewhere we can be alone, and there will be whirlwinds of passion, kicking up truth, aligning peacefully with the intellect and heart. When you think about your voice now, how it will change in the years as you continue to gain education, increase the size of your vocabulary, and how you will describe moments frozen in time, forever laminated in the poem, now on your wall, that you can see and look at forever, reminding you that those who say you will never amount to anything, or that art is fruitless, could not have been more wrong. The trajectory and velocity of our lives, the path we tread, how fast our speed is increasing. We have spent days inside praying to gods that could not hear us instead of helping others, living in the free and open world. A voice rendered useless from being punched deeply in the stomach, falling to the ground, wind knocked out of the lungs. A voice rendered meaningless, drowned out in the flood of so many voices that blend as one. A voice drowned under the water until lungs were filled with nothing but water. A voice suffocating behind closed doors that can only be opened with tens of thousands of dollars. A voice rising up from the ground and reforming the world. A voice rising above all the harmless voices and stinging the world. A voice rising out of the pool, coughing up the water and screaming in a barbaric way. Doors blown off the hinges, the voice now freely heard by everyone in the world. And when they understand this voice, they understand poetry, understand that money will become but useless, the only power becomes from the heart. Foreshadowing of the day when we will walk away from each other forever. I'll walk one way, you'll walk the other. All I can think about is our mortality. When I descend deeper into fields of bright and blue skies, I continue on my journey across the world. I strive to find a place within the world where we do not make enemies for no reason, where kindness is more common than malice, where words have more value than they initially appear to have. When you study my words in English class, and you do not read into them ill intent that is not found in my words, when I look at the bright blue sky, clouds swirling in it, I dream of better days and situations, families coming together as one and living happily. I can imagine them at the dinner table sharing their lives. Nothing can break the bond of blood. Nothing can sway me from the dreams I have, not even a whirlwind or storm. I'm secure, steady this night. In this moment I wait in the woods as time passes, and I have no clock, no watch or anything besides the movements of the celestial beings to tell me what time it is, the feeling of joy in lying down on the grass with books and nothing but books, leaving my phone at home, knowing that I will return to the world eventually, but for now I will stay here, read and write poems, verses for the soul, for the body, for the mind, and for the physical spiritual union. Untethered, free, tasting truth, the wind at your back and on your face. Finally, after 1,000 years of darkness, you have emerged from your prison. The feeling of the sun is now on your back, and love surrounds you. Everyone desires this. Very few admit it, and even fewer scream it. My only desire is to feel the sunlight warm my skin. My only desire is to hear him call my name. My only desire is to be freed from this prison style to high school. My only desire is for you to wipe the tears from my eyes. When you never realize what you have done, when you can't even understand or stop for one moment to think because of how stuck you are in the routine of your own disastrous machine. The days we come home and cry all night because we cannot leave and no one at all will be listening, even if we screamed out loud, where there is nothing but harsh criticism for our words whenever they are even heard. Another flashback. This time I was handing out books of poetry in the hallway to anyone who would take them, and they ended up on the floor or in the trash, no one studying the words or learning the truth in the storm. I dreamed of escaping the vitriolic shell which I lived in for my entire life. I go to sleep inside it and rest, and through the darkened window the last of the sunlight fades, vanishes forever. The flowers you gave me, now wilted, burned, vanished forever. Where do we go within the world if the world is nothing but locked doors that will not open without paying more than we can afford? We weren't born cash in hand, it seems. Some were too self-righteous to read poems, thought they had it all figured out, thought the world would never need changing, thought we never needed saving, and even if we did, the voice of a high school senior couldn't have any effect on the world. Some didn't have time to sit down and read poems. Too many other things to do, video games to play, false gods to pray to, and they never learned what resided in each human heart. I wore a mask, but not willingly. It was imposed upon me, the way I was expected to be. And when you step out of line at all, they label you as weird. Writing is the only means of resolution, the best means. It not only affects the world now, but leaves an imprint on time and eternity, for all future generations to cherish and to read and ruminate over forever. So in the end, it will be my voice that reigns triumphant forever. I long for the keys to the car, the handful of $100 bills, the wind at my back, the life on the road, where you will hear my words, true, hopeful. The opposite of nihilistic, in fact. My words make Christianity seem nihilistic, the purpose found in my writings greater, the pains of hell translated, the joys of heaven thrown aside to make way for something better, something expressing even more joy of freedom, and we become libertines who walk the world giving our charity freely to everyone who asks for it. Heaven falls down when we dream of it, when we think of it, and feel it, and reject anything that revolts against this one truth. Because it is better to die for truth than it is to live for brazen lies. It is better to viscerally feel the world than to feel nothing at all. There is a feeling I get when I feel the exhilarating joy of falling in love with the natural world. There is a feeling I get when I realize what a joy it is to be alive. And I know my entire great future is ahead of me. I know you will hear my words describing all these things. You will feel the same joy, all the same love for all creation, all creatures great and small. The joyful moments when you slow down to feel the sunlight drifting across your face. There will never be enough poems in any language written about this feeling, even if we strove to write about the feeling between now and the end of all time. Hopeful, curious, and joyfully patient, desperate, lamenting the past, but never looking away from the joy of the future. Nostalgic feelings for past times long gone that flood the soul and bring it into its desperation. If you know how it feels to be in love, then you have found grace. If you have found grace, then you can't be separated from it, because even the memory of it is enough to recreate it. All of us feeling the same things, moving through the world, expressing the truths we cannot explain to our own hearts, except when we taste the joy of true and irrevocable charity. Giving to strangers the most valuable part of ourselves, metaphor, myths, and reality. If you can explain these three words, how they relate to each other, I will be listening for several hundred hours, and I will become a scholar knowing all things about the topic, knowing all that I need to know, and all that I have ever wanted to know. If you break my heart, I know that the breaking of hearts is part of the human experience, and it will be mended, but only in time. It will recover from the wounds, no matter how deeply the arrow dart has pierced the inner layer of my heart. Part 3. The Descent. As she walked through the forest at night, she saw the beauty in the folds of shadows. As she grew lonely in the world, seeing the roads go on forever, feeling the soul within her grow even more passionate. The roads connecting a nation, she would drive forever and never be changed, a life in a world that no longer belonged to her. In the depth of my mind, I create new worlds. This new creation spreads to the rest of the world. She is permanently lost in a world that forgot about her. She did not speak to politicians or celebrities, but only those who had no money. The new Messiah amongst us, walking on the side of the true light. Her journey had only just begun. Her story etched on the pages of the world. And her favorite place in the world was the darkness of the woods, where she waited for the sun to claw through the roof of the trees. Weather was constantly changing. She stood in the midst of firestorms and greeted the smoke. But no matter how far away she ran, she would never escape from the smoke. Come greet me in this midnight. I will tell things to you in secret, while the world was not watching. And after I told you the secret, you kissed my cheek and walked away from with truth in your soul. How it feels to be permanently lost. How no guide or help is ever found. Life in a world where we are shielded from the bright lights by the loving embrace of shadows. She began to call these spaces her home, grasping tree trunks as she walked, knowing that each one was reaching out for love. She imagined moving forward forever in the car as the landscape changed around her. She knew all, but entrusted herself to none. I drink in lies and keep coming back. I stare from the back of the classrooms into the void. I never paid any attention to those who had no ears to hear what the Spirit says through poems. I was bent until I was broken. I allowed others to mold me as they liked. I have poured myself out completely. I have emptied my passionate praise of the bright and beautiful creation. I never sleep, always awake through these nights, always watching the darkness of the room and the dreams that follow the shadows, the life that follows despair, the sadness that makes it impossible to move when death comes to find me. I greet him like an old friend, a cloud that follows me and makes it hard to write. How in oversaturation of expression, we realize how little we really have. Drowning in a flood of uncertainty. Not knowing what the future will hold for us. There once was depth in poetry, but not anymore. Long ago we heard music, and we were united by it. We swallowed our pride. She crawls through the avenues of wasted lives, through the empty room, where we have given up and inhaled drugs with no way to leave. She filled the spaces where language became useless. She entered these spaces and reinvigorated the words that used to be useless. I want you to feel in your heart the same passion that bends the stars. I want you to inhale the melodies like drugs. I want you to find yourself. You will viscerally feel every sensation Serenity does in the city of lost passions that we gave up on, that we never followed. We believed we could do no good within the world. After feeling so much torture, eventually there will be no more feeling, apathetic to every sensation, bitter or sweet. In the forest, Serenity saw visions of our violent past and our oppressed future, where we sat in rooms alone, always told where to go, never holding the handful of cash necessary to chart our own futures. Sit down and write for me. Just process everything you are feeling. Get it out now, because now is the best time for your words to be enshrined before they evaporate. Lead me to a better world with your words. She lay down on the park bench and began to dream. And in this dream she had more relentless visions, which echoed eternity forever. She waded in these dreams like in a pool. Her headspace was filled with negative emotions and fear, but still a perfect peace that no one would understand, watching the life of the world fade, watching the life of souls slowly extinguish, with the slow movements of loneliness where we are all stuck, frozen, broken like a machine. If you can feel my heart, hold it, squeeze it. We have cast aside all notions of caring what the leaders think. We have become our own persons. We have struggled through the turmoil of the disease that crippled our world. Where still, in a small town, we stayed unable to move. We left a mark on the world, but the shadow of it soon disappeared, leaving no trace of us at all. The heart is wounded and then never forgets that it was once whole, but will never be whole again. Healing is such a distant fantasy, which we cannot understand. Bodies together, lives intertwined, break down the walls between us, bridge the oceans, swim through these oceans as far as possible. She gazes at the stars. The streetlights have all gone out. She traverses the night's lightless streets where broken hearts abound. Not a single other soul appears in the desperate sea of darkness, so she scribes out love like tattoos with no beloved to be amorously met. All lights go out eventually. The world was empty for her. She would go look at the street lights. All of them now have gone out. And during her long journey through the world, she was accustomed to silence. She suddenly realized that all life is meaningless, pointing toward nothing. She would wander through the world, not having anything to call friend or home. Her weightless soul clenched itself, knowing her journey was about to end. The ship was about to crash into land, as if after fighting so long, fighting so desperately in that night, she still could not understand what compelled her to fight, or the danger that confronted her. There were thousands of worlds behind. There were billions ahead. She did not talk about them because they were her own. She finally reached the end of the island and looked out at the waters, and the waters tempted her to come and be swallowed by them. She knew they would only spit her back out again. How many words can be written about the always present and unstoppable nature of beauty? In the moments where she sat by the river, gazing at the moon in the sky, and then stared at it, they almost brought back memories from her past life, but these were long gone, already forgotten. At the end, there is nothing left but the last and eternal fire. The fire of justice scorned, of goals never attained, the desire for things, the lust for things stronger than charity, breaking through pain. There will be no greater sorrow than to realize that this fire will burn forever, never find its destiny, always burn wanting, dreaming, without a mind, longing without a soul. How hard is it to believe that when your heart stops, your soul is also annihilated? Everyone really believes that no one ever truly dies. We all find ourselves forever, striving, competing in the game of life and death. In our last desperation, we drink in loneliness. If I should die and you were left behind, hold on to the beauty of what we had together. You drag me far into the depths. You pull me so deep into the darkness. You guide me by the hand to a sea of shadows that flood like water. I feel these things in my brain. A flood of stars of other universes, a call to love who you hate, the joy that follows the words, describing the passion of words on the page. Where those who once rejected you fade out of this world, never to be seen from or heard from again. Their words a short memory that this world will soon forget forever. The moon shines upon us, the light is inescapable. The wind blows against us, we ourselves are irreplaceable. Music guided us to places where we no longer stood alone. The light of our souls became graspable in the open night. Our bodies locked together, dancing slowly, the unraveling layer of my soul to fit perfectly into yours. My final message, words unraveled slowly. I speak slowly for fear of being misunderstood. I will never be done writing, jotting down what I see and describing it perfectly, encapsulating the spirit of everything I see. Today, after the death of my mother, I was done crying. I wanted to go anywhere away from here. A life of joy and peace, all I wanted, anywhere away from here. I echoed prayers within my soul. They didn't seem to reach anywhere. When our cancer is cured, and when we are carried away from the cancer one last time, when our dreams flood our world, when our dreams are banished from this world, I know I will always love her. Suffering we will never stop. Life we will never have again. Desperation that claws through hopelessness. I was thrust into a dream where there was nothing left but war, nothing but the worst turmoil, but we had love. It everything we needed. We held on to it and never let it go. On the boulevard of lost worlds, walking forever, lovers walking here, never finding home, always dreaming in the chaos, always running through the darkness. I felt a funeral in my brain. Somewhere there I too watched. As the coffin was carried away, those who mourned only could stand and watch. They did not know where to go, lonely, forsaken now, homeless and abandoned. I felt what was lacking in my soul, as we stood and watched. They took what was lost far away from here. We welcomed the future without you. We greeted it in the cold. We found old age long before our time. We left the world believing that the next one would be better. We chased our dreams knowing we could only feign happiness. A young soul destroyed, violence throughout the world, and bombs come crashing down on homes we built together. This young child will never see his parents again. We drink together and dance across the world. In Paris we stood on the Eiffel Tower. We talked about when we first fell in love. In New York, we walked those streets and contemplated the lives of the homeless together. In New Orleans, we walked Bourbon Street hand in hand and realized that what we had together had destroyed our poverty. In Accra, we walked every recess of those streets, and we bought goods from those who sold them. In San Diego, we watched the waves roar. They told us secrets, all of them truth. We walked the streets of many other cities until we realized that the only place we wanted to be was home, in the arms of the other. I love her more than she will ever know. I love her with the whole of my broken heart. Let the words flow from you. They will understand what it means to fall in love. She is my whole world, everything beautiful. We all crave freedom. We all will die for freedom, rather than live as slaves. A song so sad, you can no longer listen to it, telling you about the desperation within your own soul to share a front door with her. Lights all gone out forever, feeling the shadows cross me as I run through the city. Longing for the light underneath the prison door, I will never stop sleeping in these shadows as the phone rings and doors are knocked on, but I will never answer the call again. Sometimes we write our own words slowly, ruminating over each word that pours out. How long has it taken to get to this moment? All of eternity was edging toward my pen on the paper, scribing out the torture of each dreary day, and I never stopped writing, always desiring someone to hold me close. I am glad I can feel. I am happy to be here, watching the shadows flood the city. I am a lonely soul. There is no way to find another. Your hand in mine, windows down on the highway. We are going to find our new life somewhere. No matter how hard life gets, I want to always remember this moment when we are happy together. Never going to give up on the life we are building. We drive so fast down the highway of our lives. It is better to feel the fast acceleration than it is to stay stagnant, feeling nothing at all. You grasp my hand tighter as we speed up, as we take turns where we never expected to go. But we are together, and no matter how vacuous the world becomes, we will always bring our warmth to it. Poetry is nothing but life enshrined in words. Life is nothing but music in perfect motion. I will never stop speaking. I will never stop echoing words that shatter the worlds. Hold your pen closer as your only means of resolution, and the world will burn up from its guilt. And when the fires are all extinguished, something beautiful and free emerges from the world. We lived in this new world for the rest of our nights, and we labored ardently during all these days. Flow with me like water through the world. Dream with me on beds like oceans, and when we emerge, we are unstoppable. Medicate, perspire, and quickly fall into dreams, and in these dreams explore universes where you only desire to stay forever. Forgetting that these worlds are not real, when you eventually decide to leave, you are stuck there forever. You cannot move, call for help, so you slip into those depths, hands outstretched for love. Life never existed without death. Eventually you wake up and bathe in the sunlight and never stop, relishing in the warmth of a million stars at night. As the cold wind caresses your shoulders, as the night sets in forever, you walk by the light of the candles, you embrace the light, which is so scarce in the middle of so much darkness. A girl locking the door to her room, and she puts the kindle together, which will soon burn down all of the world. Her actions are exact and merciless. Her poetry is surgically precise, like razor blades piercing the skin we thought was impenetrable, cutting deeply and reaching to the bone. When light fades, we scream in the darkness for someone to hear. In the broad world, we were lied to. We were betrayed. We followed paths we never should have walked. We trusted in our need and lost more than we had. She stayed up all night reading Emily Dickinson and Plath, and realized that despair is frequently found by those who run from it. She studied those words and found a light in her hands that led her away from this monster. She cherished every moment spent away from fear. Emily Dickinson speaks to her more than anyone else, a fascination with death, a bitter taste in the mouth, but never again a taste in the soul. Take in every moment with joy. Stand breathless and catch your breath. Eat up all the air in the world and realize that there is more life to live. Exuberantly feel and practice your craft of art, and open the doors of yourself to whoever is in the greatest need, because the chilled wind speaks the same language to us all. We could no longer afford to ignore the insults hurled at us and the constant bullying that never ends. Fall in love with me tonight and feel my breath and learn the mystery of the fallen stars. Walking to school in the snow, I can't help but feel it. The call to move, the uprising in my own heart to get someone to hear me, like we float through distant stars with no hope of finding Earth again. Almost like my life, when you fall through time, desperate to go anywhere away from here, to feel anything viscerally, to embrace the wisdom of poets, that love is found in places you will never look for it. And again, I walk through the streets of a lonely city. I see no life here at all. You weren't looking for beauty here, so you found nothing. If we could find a portal to another world, I would be the first one to dive in, because in that world, she wouldn't be oceans away. If I could sit across the table from her, hold her from across the table, feel her ring, I would hold that memory with me for the rest of my life. If I could call the revolution, I wouldn't be marching alone through these streets, the only protester in a chained world that will never be free. I will always be alone. I cannot leave here. There is nowhere left to run. I would run straight into her arms. I would fall somewhere on the couch with her, and we would watch those movies together, and we both would fall asleep. The world is vast and gorgeous, like little resurrections every single day. Little moments we stand in places with the realization that we are alive. A part of me is missing. Whatever can go wrong goes wrong. COVID-19 has destroyed all of our plans. We stare into our future, uncertain as it seems. We dream of our family together. I stare into your eyes from across the world, so far from your embrace. I read thousands of books until I have heard every story of a love lost across the oceans, of dreams cast into doubt, of a love we want to feel viscerally, fading each day. But I will love her forever. Losing my mind more each day, when the anxiety crawls in. Monsters always prey on those most vulnerable, but fall me out of the trap we have fallen into. I had a dream that I was on a boat in the middle of the Atlantic, and that a storm came and capsized the ship, and there was nothing I could do to save myself. All I could do was wade in the water, and water filled my lungs relentlessly. Poetry is all I have, the only thing I can find in the darkness of the forest of this world. Nothing about the sunlight is hidden. The waves of light are welcoming, and guide us to a place in the world where we can work and be accepted. Flickering lights, feeling the joy of the passing stars. Simple, silent expression. When I look into your eyes on the cool grass, the lights in the world guided us to this single perfect moment. Look into my eyes and you will feel torment run like clouds. Every time you look into my eyes, you see something different, vast and uncontrollable, vicious and uncertain. But you grasp my hand and squeeze it, a first kiss, a pleasure of forsaken truth that we find in the arms of the other. How we only long to hold each other closer. In this holding there is resolution to confront the world bravely and openly. Hell is close, and we are now separate and alone, numb to the visceral emotions we felt before. The night was cold, and as we walked through the wind, we felt it buzzing in our ears. We were so far away from each other, and all we wanted was to be with each other. I felt the brick of reality shatter my bubble. I continued walking through the darkness, knowing that no one would hear my voice until after I am dead. This might be the last time I ever dream about love, which I had so long ago, but now seems unattainable. In this midnight of our lives, we wait patiently for a dawn that never comes. As we wait, we patiently write love letters, how we feel about what we've lost. Hatred destroys everything. The life we dreamed of enshrining ourselves in, obliterated. And no one can put the pieces back together. If life is a woken dream, then I am watching you sleep. If death is close to our souls, then life is a stranger we have never met. We do not believe we will ever see the sunlight again, the churning knife, the burning life, the brutal nature of the prison. The last trains through this city, passing by quickly, now gone. The passion, too, is gone from the crowd. All that exists in this room, just four walls and a barren routine of writing and staring, waiting for the bell to ring, of lamenting calls from no future or agency over the world. The endless chatter of those without ears. Those who had eyes to see or ears to hear became so rare that you would never find someone, even if you searched for the rest of your life. We called, but the line was dead. We followed truth wherever it led us. After the death of my mother, I walked the streets she warned me never to walk. I trotted courses I was afraid to tread, with only the stars to guide me. When the sun set, I lay asleep on the ship, and stars guided me in my dreams, and I sank into the ocean and the sky. I was on my journey through the ocean on my way back to you. I felt lost in my mind, heart, and soul. The waves carried me, and I am powerless to fight it or to control where I am drifting off to at night. I could do nothing else but dream, beg the shadows to guide me. Where the stars refused to surrender their most treasured secrets, hope vanished, and I drifted far away from everyone I had loved. We craved reconciliation with those who we had alienated. We seemed too far gone to be saved. We wailed with tears and souls most nights. Music moves our souls on forward forever, all equal, singing the song of life. We are a plague to others in the world, where I stand alone in the forest, doves flying like promises that were never fulfilled, love promised and scorned, desperate search for truth, where no one is honest, how no matter what I write, no one will hear, where in this world I sit pen in hand, ink dripping blunted sword, almighty, unwieldy, heavy, painfully drenched in my own blood, where my writing will never take on its own rhythm again, where we give up on the fight. We are lonely in a world that never knew us. We walk through the streets, all of them now empty, the corridors of a life that we will now forsake, desperately searching for a new world, desperately craving a way out of the shell we dug for ourselves. The power rests in our hands, knowing we could write anything. could become anyone we want to become. Death is the windowless room with a TV screen as the only source of light. The ones we loved are dying, and we can do nothing to save them. But our words are etched out into eternity. They will never fade away. They will always stay here visible, so that every person in the world can read them and understand them. There is always a certain energy inside our veins that drives us to keep living and fighting. I'm afraid for the future, a world where we run and hide from the fate that seeks to find us. We seek healing for age-old wounds, reminding us of our past mistakes, and how our broken parts come all undone. We fall apart together in the same small room. Hold me closer in this night, putting all my nightmares to rest forever. I run away from darker fears, so much within the world I cannot grasp or understand. If you come hold me, you will be enshrined in my world and generously thanked. When I see empty pages, I see the greatest opportunity to write so many things, describing our world and the way we wish the world would be, if only we were the ones who created the world. Fall with me into the depths of your limitless imagination. We'll never hit the bottom. Sobriety, patience, diligence, digging, clawing away and hiding our secrets, burying them so that no one else can find them. I cannot uncover them, inscribe them over the pages of this book, so that everyone can see them and sleep with them as if in its ocean on the ship and homeward bound. Beauty is not what we think it is. We don't know what is beautiful in this world. We doubt whether or not we will find things that only existed in mystery. We lose those closest to us, and then we stop feeling and feel nothing at all. Love accelerates and never stops moving. No force can act upon it to stop it, not even the breaking of all hearts. Love is stronger than glue, more adhesive than tape. It stitched our souls together and pulled until we felt the touch of the other. You look at me as if I'm a beggar, but I have so much more to offer you. Cities that were once so familiar, now such impossible memories to stitch back together. In the deepest parts of our souls, not seeking the cure for a death sentence, we are content with the lives we've lived. Across your barbed wire fences were souls you abhorred, because you did not understand what they felt, or desperation that showered upon them. You turned off your thoughts to them like a light switch, never to illuminate the room again. Echoes of memories in these fields, where we lay alone. You're long gone. I still linger here, and no matter how loudly I scream, you would never hear on this side of eternity. The true face of resurrection is not what you would expect. Your eyes are open to me, but they are completely unable to see me. In my room, thriving amidst the tears, knowing I could travel anywhere in the world, when I close my eyes, forget and dream, unravel the broken pieces of my soul, I find you in words you left behind in my notebook. How much we long that the drops of rain trailing down my skin were actually the tears of God, showing us how much he felt within a world that has forgotten about him. Because he chose to neglect us like children now left to their own devices and without a home. We will wander these streets forever, seeking a better father. I walked the path away from familiarity. I burned compasses into my skin, so I would never be lost. I traversed the world alone with no light to guide me but dreams. I savored the moments of loneliness because I know your songs were not my songs. Your voice was not my voice. Your heart was not my heart. I grasped out for the world just to feel something viscerally, instead of feeling dreams. I held so closely to familiarity, and when it was ripped from me, I could no longer stand. I was sinking into the chasms where I could no longer feel the light. I waited in the shadows for several years and wanted to feel the light again, more than anything else. I could feel the thorns of the flowers, but I could not see them. I could feel the rocks shuffling beneath my feet as I walked, but was convinced that each step was only taking me in circles. I saw visions of wicked politicians who blamed us for our problems instead of their own wicked policies. I became bored of watching the television, so I traversed the world myself to see if it was as bad as everyone else had imagined it would be. Time is inconsequential. All seasons pass without telling us anything. Save me from myself as I fall down into sadness. Save me from the plague ravaging across the land. Save me from the deadness of my own heart, which you would never understand, even if you did nothing but read and mull over my poems for 10,000 years. There are places I remember where we were unconditionally affectionate, where you took my hand, as we walked the lonely streets where silence echoed louder than my voice. As we rushed away from the other, we become erratic, irrational, gloriously powerless in our own thoughts, in which we bury ourselves for all time. How we never know whether we are being lied to. We sit patiently, we burn like photographs, we are threaded like needles. The wounds we carry are all torn open. I have made mistakes and coasted through my life half asleep. I am more than prophet. I am more than your idle lord. I do not sit absently waiting. I am invigorated, always in motion, one eternal movement, reaching out to love. The energy of melody is my name, the peace that comes through understanding and waiting patiently for the end of all time. I am a spiritual truth you will never comprehend. In my brain, search it, and you find a light that you never knew would shine, a broken shackle that fell off your own body. A constant reminder that all of us will die, movements through song in the world, exploring every part of it, but never finding what you desired more than anything. Come sit with me and write, and you will indeed be my muse. Don't say a word. All I need is to see the torment in your face, the lamentation, the tears that will come from your eyes. As life goes on and we carry forward in our quiet lives, where we know we will never be able to escape from shadows, cascading around us, calling forth more evil thoughts, daring to spit out venom into our dreams. The shadows caress our nightmares and nurture them, so that they grow and threaten our sanity. All she feels is the kiss of pain, the lament of our final destination slowly approaching. True rational fear, guiding us toward an unpredictable future, where death is the one and only certain event. The final moments in our lives were all spent lamenting the mistakes we had fallen into in our past. Her life was spent in shadows of powerful emotions that overflow the oceans and cover every avenue and empty space in the world. Praise the Lord, we found salvation. Words never said with certitude, always warnings of fire from the skies, always slanderous lies. After her death, she gazed up at the sky. Last few gaping breaths. She thanked the air that she could breathe it. She was thankful for her life, although cut short, that she could live at all. Intimacy is all we crave. To touch the clouds, touch the stars, and mingle with them. Every sensation we feel, bitter or sweet, is drenched in the same taste, a taste of life and vigorous breath. Hold me close as I fall asleep for the last time, and only God knows if I will once again arise. Kiss me deeper, the last time you kiss me. Hold me closer than any lover. I will let you take me over, and the drops of rain fall all over our sweaty faces and drench the world around us, and we flee into our car. I will hold you in the sadness of the night that passes slowly. I will hold you as a light in my hands that guides me through poverty. When I have no more breath, love will breathe for me. When I have no more words to speak after the panic attack, and my heart feels that like it will break, love will speak for me instead. Families are broken so easily. Life destroyed, love overturned, happiness overruled. You understood me without the need for words. You healed me when I didn't notice I was dying. When the world falls apart, only charity will mend it back together. The voice of God is heard quietly in the woods at night when no other voice is heard. Less than a whisper, more than a myth and a metaphor, but somewhere in between. I mourn when I think about being away from you. I bring all things together in perfect balance. With the words I write on this page, with the wrath that unfolds and I recreate you and the anger disappears. All I need to free us from the slavery inflicted on us, our powerful words and the ability to write them. All I have is the air I breathe and my own voice, taking the air and releasing the rhythm that you will hear, understand, and inhale yourself, and exhale to others, spread across the world until all of us are free. Part 4. Eternity. Eternal tears would shed light on ethereal things that fell down her face. The only reason we will stop what we are doing is for love. Otherwise, the cogs on the machine turn mercilessly forever, and those waiting in the lobbies of the airports of forever will never reach their beloved. Flight eternally delayed, life forever put on hold. Who can unscrew the locks? Who can release us from the prison? We have found ourselves locked inside. We find our salvation in our own perspiration, before the life in our bones expires, and we stand crippled alone. Something miraculous happened to the world, as Serenity, now living out her life on the streets of cities, looked up at the sky. The lights no longer gave her the same feeling or connection to the mysterious, the unknown, or the divine that she had always felt before. The wind no longer spoke to her, and breathed in every breath, still with gratitude but with unquenchable torment, regrets and esoteric charities. Poetry was slain in this world. Poetry no longer existed. It was destroyed, or rather annihilated. Language itself became dull from now on, and no longer carried with it any magic of feeling, expression, or gifts. She sought reconciliation with poetry, but it never came back to her. It was now strange and completely, thoroughly rejected her. The last sacrament now gone forever. The mesmerizing gift of falling. The places we now find ourselves whole, united, imperfectly and unbreakably. The despair that frequents us on the days when we would rather not deal with it. The sea of stars we sink into and drown in like water. When our planet's dust is scattered to the ends of the universe, but no one is around to witness it. Racing hearts trying to beat the other to a place of satisfaction. A dream misplaced. Can you help her find it? The feeling of revenge that taunts her. Tells her what she has now lost and will never be found. She ruminated about all these things, then found that she herself had become the poem. Her actions were all poetry, all rhyming with the empty space in the universe, because her heart was filled with light, while everything else was completely shut off, completely dark. She looked at herself in the mirror in the hotel room. She gazed into her own eyes, and she saw in them more torture than she could ever reason with. She saw in those eyes a longing for peace, as powerful as the torture in her life, traveled so far, gone the distance only people would write about, and only adherents of mystical religions would dare to believe in. How could she be a poet without wrapping her soul around another's? She would write about everything except for what she saw in her own eyes. She would never understand what's in her eyes. When she looked there, she had a vision. When she saw herself in the reflection of her own eyes, and then a single tear fell down her cheek. Lamenting the lack of power she had to go back to the state she was in before. For the first time in her half-life, she regretted not being able to go back to the life she had before, where she could live a normal life as a teenager. So many things she would be concerned about then that she did not want to be concerned about now. However, it was like the last part of childhood was ripped from her prematurely, and was thrust into a world abandoned by everyone she knew. She had fallen headfirst into a dark world, where no one would understand her, where no one would see her. There would be no one to tell her bright and beautiful story to, which was worth understanding and worth creating a religion about, the scorned Messiah in a world made for her. So she opened up her notebook again and began to try to write poetry, or at least jagged lines that would be understood as jumping everywhere, but really they came together in prose. The true poet feels everything, is felt by the world as generously as they feel the world. That is the true mark of poetry, and walks paths others are only afraid to walk, would never walk on their own accord. Powerful emotions that would be able to twist the physical oceans into a whirlwind of energy, excitement, mania, and after mania would follow euphoria. Sleepless nights where, having no one else, she would implore the winds to hear a sound of the words she was speaking, but the winds became silent, giving no indication or recognition that they heard a single word she said. So she put the notebook down and lay down on her bed. Her dreams followed her into the world. She dived headfirst into them. She saw pain as he was before the first time she died. She wanted to hold his hand one more time and look into his eyes the way he was before 25 years had changed everything. Write stories that reference him symbolically and show them to everyone, but only he would understand. What if penance could be granted just one more time? What if this time, instead of reappearing in the world 25 years later, she could return to the same place she was before? It would not happen. Like a nightmare, the only way to escape is to wake up, except there was nothing to wake up from. That is the vulgarity of life. That there is no escape from the mess we find ourselves in. But still, why does the soul reach out for these things? As if it had been taken out of its own world and thrust into a different one. The truth is, if something was made for someone, it longs for it, at least in some sense. But the brutality of this passing time, the hammer laying down on us, telling us we never attain our goals. She didn't desire anything except for what people simply have. What people have in a simple life, the connection people desire to wake up next to someone, to always know that they will be there, or even to have knowledge that you were once loved in this world in the past, and then realize that times were good in the past, or even the knowledge that friends or family care about you. And here she was with no family, but she did not despair. She let herself be taken over by the flood of words flowing from her. When she sat on the bed, started to write more, after she had picked up the notebook again and just wrote, as if nothing would stop those words from flowing, as if the world itself would witness these words. They would be compelled by them to change, as if we could see photographs of the past and realize that nothing will direct us into a future where we do not see the past. She knew that music invites everyone to unite with those who they would never be connected to. She knew that when she asked something from the music, she would receive, because it is better to dream than it is to live in despair in a fallen world, but instead to build one of your own, to start from scratch, and to reject the things that aren't beautiful, so that from then on, future generations could enjoy them, so that this love will flood everything as nations grew together in an intercommunion that is extraordinary, but love no longer thrived. She knew that people sitting with their guitars alone created glorious music, even if no one heard it. The answer to the age-old question, what happens when you're the only one in a deserted area and scream at the top of your lungs? Does anyone hear? The answer is, you are heard. Your voice is adamant. Your voice is lively. Your voice will shake the foundations of the world. The point is that the spark inside you moved, and that the spark lights a fire that burns anything that needs to burn, and rebuilds everything that needs to be rebuilt in the world. And when the world burns, rebuilds itself, gifts will be received, gifts will be given, and everything in the world will be received with thanksgiving. Everything freely given, because the people know that to exuberantly love is better than to receive anything at all. Everyone will offer everything they have to everyone. She thought this and longed for this world. Then she fell back asleep, and then again wrote in her notepad about the dream she had. When she woke up the next morning, she stayed in that hotel room for 6 days and would spend all day there writing about her experiences, everything she had felt during the time after she had been resurrected and before, so that everyone in the world would know her story, a voice no longer scorned, louder, more barbaric than before, more present, and even more vicious. Vicious, not spiteful, but unfathomable persistence by nature, that tears through every part of the world, finds it where it is, and recreates it. So she got up in the morning, went downstairs to have breakfast, but was only hungry for an apple. She felt as if she did before she died, manic, depressed, but now these were heightened, and she could not just feel for herself, but for everyone. She understood torment and believed in it too. As the other residents of the hotel sat at tables, she struck up a conversation, but not for long before they left. And once again she was wandering the streets, walking all the places she had walked before. She had returned to New York City, and looked out and followed the skyscrapers again. She remembered when she was alive before and sat there looking at the same skyscrapers. She realized that some of them had collapsed, some of them had changed or been replaced, but all of them looked as huge as before. And she sat in the corner for 6 days as 10,000s of people walked by and watched as the rain fell, the wind came, then the sun came out again and the moon was eventually in the sky. Then she slept on the ground. She did not leave the spot for a while. She ate her food, and after the lesson she learned sitting there, she once again walked through the city. She dropped a page from her notebook that fell out, and then reached to pick it up. A stranger was there who gave it back to her. She was confused about how the stranger knew her name, but the truth was this was not the strangest thing that had happened to her during her life, so it did not strike her as odd. But then she realized she had written her name at the end of the page, signing it. And then she said, "Forgot I wrote my name there." But the man had known her better than she knew. When he gave the paper back to her, he said, "How would you like the chance to live again?" And then she said, "I am alive again, penance granted, resolutions and prayers accepted." And then the witness replied, "No, you will live again, relive the life you had before." She thought he was talking about some kind of religious ritual that she wanted nothing to do with. So she walked away, not thinking any more of the words of the witness. After she saw the book in his pocket, which she believed was a Bible. She walked the opposite direction, saying, "No, thank you, I'm good." But this would not be the last time she would see of him. He knew how wrong she was about eternity, and how each impact we have on each other is eternal itself. How when a soul's touched, the universe is touched, and when a universe is touched, eternity is transformed, like the rhythmic notes of a song on a guitar. That is the way the world goes. There is a fate that underlines us, he thought, and knew that his mission was to watch over a world like a guardian angel, giving hope to souls that had lost their vision. Now she found herself hitchhiking through the country, with her thumb outstretched. And as she sat in the back seats of cars that drove her free of charge, she began to sketch out words, unsure if any muses exist to invoke. As she was writing, the window was open. A sharp breeze as the car sped up rapidly. One of the pages flew out the window, never to be seen by her again. So she wrote it over with a new page and tried to recreate what was there before but could not, so that all she wrote were a few sentences and gave up. Images in her mind, like hate preachers on every street corner, like the death of the wars that could have been. All forms of violence unified, coming from the same source. She gripped onto her notebook desperately, because it was the only thing she had that made her remember the past. She knew that if she wrote something down and was able to look at it later, she would not forget it. It was an old saying, but it was true. She remembered the time she spent at night writing, and the hours became days. The days became a marathon of self-expression, begging to be shared. They were words tattooed inside her heart. She could not see them, but she knew they were there. She tried to recreate them, knowing that if she wrote long enough, the words that were tattooed inside her would reveal themselves and declare their true intentions. Everything she had led up to one perfect moment, where in this moment there would be peace. Suddenly, as the car drove, another car slammed into the side of the car she sat in. Her body was wrenched for a moment, and she thought her neck almost snapped. But when she came to herself a moment later, she realized that the driver was dead. She waited for a moment for the ambulance to come. They removed her from the car. She stayed in a hospital for a few days. She was not seriously injured, but they wanted to make sure she was okay. She was there in a hospital gown, eating dinner on a hospital bed. She felt as if she was talking to the ghosts that followed her, as if there was a presence there, as if they would understand her, as if only in dying we become very compassionate, sympathetic, and empathetic. There was a familiar presence there. It wavered and stayed with her. Then it was night in the hospital, and she walked through it, remembering the time she was in a mental ward where people did not believe she had risen from the dead. She had a flashback in her mind, and during this flashback she remembered being kicked by the doctors as they tried to force medication down her throat, and she wailed in agony as she was on the floor being kicked. She did not try to reason with them anymore because she knew they were wicked. They had the path they had chosen, decided that all that existed was reality, that all is meaningless. that if no one saw they were abusing her, no one would care. At night in the mental ward, she would wait for the sunlight to come, but would dream about traveling to other parts of the ward, talking to the people there and understanding their problems, bearing them herself. But she could not bear to think of that. It terrified her. She returned to reality where she was in the current hospital after the car crash. She woke up and found herself staring at the same sunlight again, which pierced through the hospital window. It warmed her face. She was discharged from it the next day. She walked the rural roads, seeing farms everywhere, mountains in her periphery, with her backpack on her shoulders containing all the food she needed, 300 USD in cash. That was all she had. She continued walking. As she walked, night set in. As she came to a rural home and saw it burning down, for a moment she thought of just walking past it, but realized that someone inside could be suffering. She approached it to see what was happening. As the fire trucks pulled up, sirens wailing, she stood next to the fire trucks. Then someone came up and stood next to her. Looking up at the flames, the man said, "Hope no one's seriously hurt, don't you?" "Of course," said Serenity. "You're not from around here, are you?" the man said. "No, I'm not," she replied. Then a moment later she realized who she was talking to. It was the man who approached her with a Bible in his jacket. "Who are you?" she asked. "I'm a witness," the man replied. "I recognize you from before. You had a Bible in your pocket. You talked to me about religion." "This," the man said, producing the old book from his pocket. "These are words from the greatest poets of our time." The man opened it, and Serenity recognized it as pages from Leaves of Grass, and not only that, but also works of John Keats, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, Tyler Knott Gregson, lyrics to rock bands Serenity recognized. "It is you," she exclaimed. "How did you get here?" The man replied with the same confidence as before. "Life is a great poem, and we can write the words ourselves. Would you like to rewrite your past, change what has happened?" Serenity was shocked and said, "I would do anything to change it." The man asked her to sign her name beside a long list of all the poets who had written their words in the book. When she signed, everything about the world changed. The world around her changed slowly, and then in an instant. She was in the classroom again, seeing all the students around her from the back of the room. The same clothes as before, hair, aesthetic, the same feelings as before flooded her mind, just as clear and vicious as before. She reached in her pocket to check her phone and realized it was the last day of high school, then heard gunshots at the corner of the school, and the students rushed out of the room, sprinting to the exit. As the students fled the classroom, she stood in the hallways, chaos all around her. Her mind fled with thoughts of unbelief, but she knew she had to decide. If Serenity decides to run and find pain and save both their lives, read No Greater Sorrow. If she instead decides to stop the shooter at all costs, saving as many lives as possible, certainly resulting in her own death again, read The Last and Eternal Fire. Title taken from a line by Amelia Vandergast. Joseph Leo Hickey lives in Virginia. He's the author of 11 other poetry books, including Baptism of Apathy, Unity, Love Poems at the End of Our Lives, Leafy, The Last Poem, Purity Redeemed, The Penultimate Poems, Harmony, The Revenant, I Know Nothing But Miracles, and True Daughter of the Soil. He is currently 28 years old. He is the founder of Melodium House. His upcoming books are Baptism of Apathy, Volumes 2 through 14, No Greater Sorrow, The Last and Eternal Fire, and American-Born Psalms of the Silent Nation. His YouTube channel is All the Stars Are Dead. His email is joseph@melodiumhouse.com. This presentation was read by the author. Thank you for listening.